Samuel had always thought his life would remain simple forever. He lived alone on a quiet stretch of land where the desert touched the edge of the plains. His house was small, his barn old, and his fields stretched wide in every direction. Most people would have found the silence unbearable, but Samuel had lived with silence for so long that it felt like an old friend. Every morning he woke before the sun, fed his animals, checked his fields, and worked until his back ached. It was not an exciting life, but it kept him alive. And for years he convinced himself that this was enough. But deep inside, Samuel carried a quiet heaviness. He had tried once, long ago, to start a family, but nothing worked out. Women in town found him too quiet, too serious, too distant. He never knew what to say or how to impress anyone. Slowly, he stopped trying. He accepted loneliness like a coat he had to wear forever. Only his land kept him steady, its dryness, its wind, and its silent nights. One evening, a fierce storm swept across the desert. The sky shook with thunder, the wind roared like an angry animal, and rain hammered against his windows. Samuel barely slept that night. He worried about his crops, his animals, and whether the old barn roof would survive the storm. The lightning flashes lit up his house again and again, reminding him how alone he truly was. When dawn finally arrived, the world outside looked washed out and tired. The clouds had thinned, the air felt cold, and the ground was soaked. Samuel stepped outside slowly, bracing himself for the damage he might find. He walked toward the barn, pushing open the heavy doors. A few shingles had fallen, but the structure still stood. That was a relief. But as he turned to walk back, something strange caught his eye near the fence line. Something lying in the mud, something that did not belong to the land at all. At first he thought it might be an injured animal blown in by the storm, but as he walked closer, his steps slowed and his breath caught. It was a young woman. She lay on her side, half covered in wet dust, her dark hair spread around her like a heavy blanket. She wore traditional Apache clothing, colored cloth wrapped around her, decorated with beads and patterns Samuel had only seen from afar. Her arms were bruised, her forehead marked with dry blood, and she looked weak, almost fading. Samuel froze, unable to believe what he was seeing. This land was close to Apache territory, land the tribe protected fiercely. No outsider went near it unless they wanted trouble. And no Apache woman wandered alone in the middle of a storm like this, especially one dressed in ceremonial cloth. Samuel felt fear tighten his chest. Whoever she was, her presence on his land meant something serious. He knelt beside her carefully, afraid she might be dead. But when he touched her shoulder lightly, she moved. Her eyelids fluttered weakly, and she whispered something too soft for him to understand. Her voice was rough, like someone who had been running for hours. "You're hurt," Samuel said softly, though he didn't know if she understood English. "You need help." He was not the kind of man who knew how to handle strangers, especially strangers in danger. But he couldn't leave her lying in the mud. Carefully, he lifted her into his arms. She was light, but her body trembled with exhaustion. Mud covered her legs, and her clothing was soaked from the storm. Samuel carried her toward his house, feeling both fear and responsibility pressing on him. Inside, he set her gently on the small bed near the fireplace. He lit a fire to warm her, brought a blanket, and wiped the mud from her face with a cloth. She watched his movements through half-opened eyes, confused and scared. When he tried to speak, she did not respond except with soft, pained breaths. Hours passed as she drifted in and out of consciousness. Samuel checked her injuries carefully. Her right ankle was swollen, and she had cuts on her arms and back, as if she had fallen or been chased. The more he looked at her condition, the more uneasy he felt. Something had happened to her before the storm. Something dangerous. By afternoon, She finally woke up properly. Her eyes opened wide, sharp and alert, like a wild animal ready to defend itself. She sat up quickly, trembling as she looked around the unfamiliar room. Samuel raised his hands gently. "It's all right," he said. "You're safe here. I won't hurt you." She stared at him for a long moment before speaking. Her voice was soft but tense. Where am I?" "On my farm," Samuel replied. "You were outside near my barn. You were unconscious. I brought you inside." She looked down at the blanket wrapped around her, then at the fire, and then back at Samuel. She seemed unsure whether to trust him. Her eyes carried both fear and pride, an expression Samuel had never seen before. He wanted to ask 100 questions, but he didn't want to scare her. Finally, she spoke again, her English broken and heavy with accent. "Why, did you help me?" Samuel hesitated. He had no grand answer, no heroic reason. He simply couldn't leave a human being to suffer. "Because you needed help," he said softly. "Anyone would have done the same." She lowered her eyes as if she doubted that. After a long pause, she whispered, "My name, Ayanna." Samuel repeated it softly. "Ayanna." It felt unusual on his tongue, but gentle. She nodded, confirming it. When she tried to stand, she winced in pain and grabbed the bedpost. Samuel shook his head immediately. "You shouldn't move. Your ankle is hurt." Ayanna looked frustrated at her own weakness. "I must leave," she said. "I cannot stay long." Samuel could hear the fear behind her words. Something or someone was chasing her, but she couldn't even stand without pain. "You won't be able to walk far like this," he said firmly. "Stay until you can move without hurting yourself." She looked at him again, studying him carefully, trying to decide if he was trustworthy. Samuel had never been studied like that before. Her gaze felt sharp, almost seeing through him as if she was searching for hidden intentions. But Samuel had none. He was simply a lonely farmer who found a stranger on his land. After a long silence, Ayanna nodded. "Just for a little while," her eyes seemed to say. The rest of the day passed quietly. Samuel prepared simple food, bread, soup, and water, and placed it near her. She ate slowly, watching him with caution. Every small sound made her tense, as if she expected danger at any moment. Samuel realized her life before arriving here must have been full of fear. When the sun set, Samuel stepped outside to check the land. The desert air was cool. The sky painted with orange light. But something troubled him deeply. Ayanna's clothing, her ornaments, the marks painted on her wrist, these were not normal. He recognized one detail from stories townspeople whispered. The specific painted symbol meant she was part of a ceremonial group, possibly a bride chosen by her tribe for a strict purpose. If that was true, her being here, alone, injured, frightened, was not just unusual, it was forbidden. Samuel closed his eyes, feeling the weight of the truth settle on him. He didn't know what would happen next, but one thing he was certain of. His life was no longer the same, and the woman inside his home was at the center of a story he never asked for, but could no longer walk away from. Ayanna woke the next morning before the sun. The room was quiet except for the soft crackle of the fading fire. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. Her mind returned to the storm, the long night she had run, and the fear that chased her until her legs gave out. When she realized she was still in Samuel's home, she stiffened. She had not planned to stay longer than a few hours, and yet here she was, wrapped in a blanket that did not belong to her, in a bed that belonged to a man she did not know. Samuel was outside feeding the animals. She could hear the distant clink of metal buckets and the soft sounds of the mule snorting. She tried to stand again, slowly lowering her injured foot to the wood floor, but pain shot through her ankle. She grabbed the wall to steady herself. The disappointment on her face was clear. She hated feeling helpless. Hated depending on someone she barely knew. But her body had limits, and she had pushed it too far already. Samuel entered the house a few minutes later, wiping his hands on a cloth. The moment he saw her awake and sitting up, he gave a small nod. His greetings were always simple, quiet, but somehow warm. "How's the ankle?" he asked. Ayanna didn't answer immediately. She didn't like showing weakness, especially not to an outsider. But she couldn't hide the truth. "Still hurts," she said softly. "You need rest," he replied. "It'll take time." Ayanna tightened her jaw. Time was something she did not have. Time was dangerous for her. Every hour she stayed here increased the risk for both of them. Her tribe would be searching. They did not let ceremonial brides disappear without consequence. She looked out the window, her eyes scanning the horizon as if expecting riders to appear at any moment. Samuel noticed her worry. "No sign of anyone," he said. "Just calm morning wind." But Ayanna shook her head. "They will come," she whispered. "They will not stop looking." Samuel wanted to ask what exactly she was running from, but he respected her silence. He knew she was holding back something heavy, something painful. So instead of questions, he filled a small bowl with warm water and placed it near her. "You can wash," he said. "If you want." She hesitated at the gesture. In her world, kindness was often a mask for expectations. But Samuel's voice carried no pressure. He simply offered what he could. Slowly, she dipped the cloth into the warm water and cleaned the dirt from her arms and face. The heat relaxed her tense muscles. And for the first time since she arrived, she felt a small sense of peace. Samuel prepared a simple breakfast. He wasn't a man known for fancy cooking, but he always made sure the food was warm and the portions fair. He placed a plate near her and stepped back, giving her space. She ate quietly, trying to understand him. He didn't talk unnecessarily, didn't stare at her, didn't act on curiosity. He moved with the calm energy of someone who had lived alone long enough to learn patience. After some time, Ayanna finally spoke. "You live alone?" Samuel nodded. "Yes. Been many years now." "Why?" she asked, not rudely, but with real curiosity. To her, a man's loneliness was strange. Tribal men always lived surrounded by family, elders, and warriors. Silence like this was foreign to her. Samuel took a moment to answer. "Life turned that way," he said. "Didn't choose it. Just happened." Ayanna looked at him more closely then. His eyes carried stories he didn't tell. His hands were rough from years of work. His shoulders looked heavy with memory. Perhaps she thought he was carrying his own pain. Perhaps they were both running from something in different ways. She placed the bowl aside and finally said the words she had been hiding since she woke. "I should leave soon." Samuel expected this, but he still felt something sink inside him. "You can't walk safely," he said. "You can barely stand. If you go now, you'll collapse again." "I cannot stay," she insisted firmly. "My people, they will not understand. They will think wrong things. They will punish." Her voice tightened as if the memories behind those words hurt deeply. Samuel kept his tone calm. "I don't want trouble for you, but I also don't want to watch you walk straight into danger." Ayanna looked away. She hated how trapped she felt. In her tribe, she had responsibilities, strict roles, and expectations placed on her since childhood. Her life was shaped by tradition, not by choice. The ceremonial markings she wore were not gifts. They were chains. She had been told whom to marry, where to live, what future to accept. Running away was not something an Apache woman could do without consequence, but staying here with a farmer. That was unthinkable. She was caught between two paths, and neither felt safe. After a long silence, she whispered something unexpected. "Why help me? You could have left me outside. No one would know." Samuel looked surprised by the question. Because you were hurt. Because it was the right thing to do. She watched him carefully, waiting for signs of hidden motives. But there were none. Samuel was simple in his goodness, not foolish, not loud, not trying to impress. He helped her because she needed it, nothing more. Samuel sat on the edge of a chair across the room. Whatever you're carrying, you don't have to tell me, but I won't hurt you, and I won't tell anyone you're here. His voice held a quiet strength that made her heart soften a little. It was rare for her to meet someone who offered help without asking for something in return. Hours passed. Ayanna rested, and Samuel worked outside. The sun rose higher in the sky, drying the land still damp from the storm. Samuel kept checking the horizon, not out of fear for himself, but out of worry for her. He didn't want anyone to come looking for her before she was ready to move. By afternoon, Ayanna tried to stand once more. This time she managed a few slow steps with the support of the wall. Her face was focused, determined. She had lived her whole life learning to be strong. Weakness was not something she allowed easily. Samuel walked inside and immediately noticed her struggling. "Careful," he said quickly, stepping closer but stopping before touching her. He always let her choose whether she wanted help. "I must learn to walk again," she said. "I cannot stay long." Samuel nodded. "Then take your time. No need to rush and fall." Ayanna hated how sensible his words sounded. She knew he was right, but her heart carried tension like a wound that refused to close. She didn't tell him everything yet, how she had been chosen as a ceremonial bride, how she refused the match, how she ran because she no longer wanted a life controlled by others. She didn't share the fear that her tribe might accuse Samuel of stealing her, even though he saved her life. She didn't tell him how every drumbeat in the distance haunted her. As the evening fell, something shifted between them, a soft moment of understanding. Samuel brought her a small carved wooden cup filled with tea made from desert herbs. "Good for pain," he said gently. Ayanna accepted it. As she sipped the warm liquid, she noticed for the first time how careful Samuel was with everything he did, how he closed the door softly, how he placed things gently, how he never raised his voice. He was quiet, but not cold, simple, but not dull, lonely, but not bitter. She felt safe here, but safety was the very thing she feared most, because safety could make her stay. Samuel sat across the room carving a piece of wood, something he did to calm his mind. Ayanna watched the way his hands moved slowly, shaping the wood into something meaningful. The act itself felt peaceful. After a while, she spoke again. "I did not fall here by accident." Samuel stopped carving and looked at her. Ayanna took a slow breath. "I ran from my people. I ran all night. I lost the path. I ran until I could not breathe. The storm came. I fell." Her voice was steady but heavy. Samuel did not interrupt. "I was chosen," she continued softly, "chosen for a union I did not want. It was not my choice. I refused. They said a woman cannot refuse." Samuel's eyes widened slightly. He didn't say it out loud. But everything made sense now. The ceremonial cloth, the painted marking, the fear. "You were trying to escape," he said. She nodded. "Yes, they will come for me." Samuel felt the weight of her truth settle inside him. He knew what this meant for her, and for him. "You're safe here," he said quietly. Ayanna met his eyes for a brief moment. There was something unspoken in her gaze, gratitude, fear, hope, all mixed together. She lowered her eyes again, placing the empty cup aside. For Samuel, the moment changed something inside him. Ayanna was no longer just a stranger he rescued. She was a woman fighting for her freedom, carrying pain deeper than she allowed the world to see. And for Ayanna, Samuel was no longer just a lonely farmer. He was the first person who ever looked at her as someone who deserved a choice. The night passed with a quiet understanding between them. Neither said much more, but the silence was no longer cold. It felt like the beginning of something fragile, something unexpected, something forbidden, but deeply human. For the next few days, the quiet rhythm of Samuel's farm continued, but the feeling inside the small house was completely different. Ayanna was no longer a frightened stranger fighting to stay awake. She was alert now, aware of her surroundings and stronger each day. Her ankle was still swollen, but she could walk slowly with support. She spent her mornings sitting near the window, watching the open land stretch across the horizon, her thoughts heavy and deep. Samuel used to work with silence as his only companion, but now he found himself listening for the soft sounds she made. Her footsteps, her careful breathing, her whispering words in her own language. He didn't say it aloud, but her presence changed everything. His days felt more meaningful. He found himself working faster, eager to check on her, to make sure she felt safe. She never asked for help, but he always offered it quietly. And though she rarely smiled, there were moments when her eyes softened, moments when she allowed herself to breathe easier. But the calm on his land felt fragile. One evening, Ayanna heard something distant while washing her hands near the window, a faint rhythm echoing across the open desert. She stiffened immediately. Her fingers froze mid-air and her breathing grew shallow. Samuel noticed her sudden fear and walked over quickly. "What is it?" he asked. Ayanna didn't move. She listened again, her eyes dark with worry. "Drums," she whispered. "Far away, but they are coming closer." Samuel stepped outside to listen. The wind was light, and the desert was beginning to cool for the night, but he couldn't hear what she heard. He looked back at her, troubled. "You're sure?" Ayanna nodded. "My people use drums when they search in groups. It means they are not far." Samuel felt a coldness settle in his chest. Her fears were no longer distant. The moment he had been silently preparing for was finally approaching. He walked back inside and shut the door gently, his mind racing. He did not want trouble with anyone, especially not a tribe known for protecting their own fiercely. But he also didn't want to force Ayanna to run again when she could barely stand properly. Ayanna sat on the edge of the bed, her hands tightly clasped. "They will think you took me," she said quietly. "They will not listen first. They will act." Samuel's heart sank. He knew she was right. The situation was dangerous, not just for her, but for him as well. "What are you going to do?" he asked softly. Ayanna lifted her head slowly. Her eyes were filled with fear, but also strength. "I will leave in the morning, while it is still dark. They must not find me here." "You can't walk far," Samuel reminded her. "Your ankle—" "I will walk," she said firmly. "Even if it hurts. It is better than bringing danger to your home." Her words struck him harder than she expected. The idea of her leaving, limping alone into the desert, weakened and afraid, made his chest tighten painfully. He didn't realize until that moment how much he had grown used to her presence, her silence, her watchful eyes, her unexpected wisdom. "You don't have to go alone," Samuel said. "I can help you find a safer path." Ayanna shook her head quickly. "No. If they see you with me, it will be worse. They will think you stole a bride. That crime is unforgivable." Samuel couldn't argue with the truth. Still, the thought of her disappearing from his life so suddenly filled him with a heavy sadness he couldn't hide. He lowered his eyes, unsure what to say. Ayanna noticed, and for the first time, she softened in a way she had not allowed herself before. "You have shown me kindness," she said quietly. "More than anyone outside my tribe ever did." Samuel looked up, surprised and touched. Ayanna's gaze held something gentle, something honest. She hesitated for a moment before speaking again. "In my tribe?" Trust is rare. It must be earned. But you did not ask for anything. You gave help without wanting reward. She paused, placing a hand over her chest. I thank you for that. The sincerity in her voice made Samuel swallow hard. He didn't know what to say, so he simply nodded, hoping it showed she understood. The rest of the evening passed quietly. Ayanna rested while Samuel paced outside, unable to settle his thoughts. He checked his tools, his barn, the fence, anything to distract himself from the anxiety growing in his chest. The idea of her walking into danger alone felt wrong, but he also knew he couldn't imprison her with safety she didn't want. When night fell, Ayanna finally slept. Samuel stayed awake longer than usual, sitting at the edge of the porch, staring at the horizon. The stars shimmered above him, and the cool wind brushed against his skin. He wondered what life would be like after she left. He wondered why he felt so much fear at the thought of losing someone he had just met days ago. But deep down, he knew the answer. She had filled the loneliness inside him without even trying. The next morning, Ayanna woke before dawn. The sky was still dark, and the air was cold. She wrapped the blanket around her shoulders and took a slow breath. Today, she would leave. Today, she would walk into the unknown once again. Her ankle hurt, but she ignored the pain. Freedom always came with a price, and she had accepted that long ago. She stepped outside quietly, trying not to wake Samuel. But he was already there, sitting on the porch with a lantern beside him. He had not slept much, and his eyes looked tired. When she stepped into the cool morning air, he turned his head toward her. You were going to leave without saying goodbye? He asked softly. Ayanna looked away. It is easier, she whispered. Less pain. Samuel gave a sad smile. Not for me. She didn't know how to answer that. Her strength, which carried her through fear and long nights, suddenly trembled. Samuel stood up and reached for something behind him. He held out a small leather pouch. Food, water, a piece of cloth for warmth. Take it. Ayanna looked at the pouch, then back at him. I cannot take this. You need it. I'll be all right, he insisted. You are walking through empty land. You need it more. She hesitated, struggling with pride and gratitude. Thank you, she finally whispered, taking the pouch. Samuel wished he could say more, but his voice felt locked. He wanted to tell her she didn't have to leave. He wanted to tell her she could stay, heal, rest, talk, share stories. He wanted to say that her presence made his quiet life feel alive again, but he didn't dare speak those words. Instead, he asked, Will you be safe? Ayanna lowered her eyes. I do not know, but I will try. She stepped forward, leaning slightly on her uninjured foot, preparing to walk into the dim morning light. But before she could take her second step, the sound hit them both. Hoofbeats, distant but unmistakable. Samuel's eyes widened. Ayanna froze completely. The riders were approaching fast, the rhythm strong and steady. The sound echoed across the open land like a warning bell. They found me, she whispered, fear cracking her voice for the first time. Samuel looked toward the distant ridge. He could see dust rising in the early light. A group of riders, maybe 5, maybe more, were approaching at full speed. You can't run, Samuel said quickly. Your ankle! Ayanna backed up, her heart pounding. They will think you took me. You must tell them I came on my own. Samuel stepped closer. I won't let them hurt you. Ayanna's eyes widened. You cannot fight them. They will punish you. They will punish me. The hoofbeats grew louder. Samuel looked into her eyes filled with fear, strength, and a quiet plea. He didn't know what he was about to do. He only knew that letting her face this alone felt impossible. I'll stand with you, he said softly. Ayanna stared at him, shocked. For a moment, her fear softened, replaced by something deeper, a feeling she didn't yet understand. The riders came closer, shadows growing larger against the rising sun. Ayanna grabbed Samuel's arm. "Whatever happens, do not lie. They must know the truth." Samuel nodded. "Then we'll tell them." Together they stepped forward, the rising sun painting their silhouettes against the land. The moment fear and courage collided, everything between them changed forever. The riders approached with a speed that made the ground tremble under Samuel's feet. Dust rose behind their horses like a long shadow. Ayanna held her breath, gripping Samuel's arm tightly before she forced herself to let go. She did not want the riders to mistake their closeness for something it was not. She stepped forward carefully, her injured ankle making her wobble slightly. Samuel stayed beside her, standing firm even though fear knotted his stomach. He had never faced men like these before, warriors from a tribe known for their pride and for protecting their own with unbreakable loyalty. He could feel his heart pounding, but he refused to step back. Something inside him had changed. He could not watch Ayanna stand alone. The group stopped a short distance away. 6 Apache riders, all strong, vigilant, and covered in traditional markings. Their faces carried a mixture of exhaustion and fierce determination, as if they had been searching for days. The leader, an older warrior with sharp eyes and a deep scar across his cheek, stepped forward first. Ayanna straightened her back despite her pain. She forced her breathing to calm. She looked like a woman ready to face whatever came, even if she was terrified. One of the younger warriors pointed at her with disbelief. "Ayanna," he said in their language, the word sounding like both accusation and relief. Another rider muttered something harsh, and the leader held up his hand to silence them. The leader's gaze shifted toward Samuel, studying him from head to toe with unreadable calmness. It wasn't anger. It wasn't curiosity. It was calculation, as if he were trying to understand the entire story simply by reading Samuel's stance. Samuel swallowed hard. His voice was steady but low. "She was injured," he said. "I found her near my barn after the storm. I only helped her." The leader's eyes stayed locked on Samuel for a few seconds after he finished speaking. Samuel didn't look away. He knew fear could look like guilt, and guilt could cause misunderstandings that brought danger. He kept his voice honest, clear, and calm. Ayanna stepped forward, raising her hand slightly. "He speaks the truth," she said, her voice stronger than before. "He did not touch me. He did not take me. I ran on my own. I fell. He saved my life." The riders exchanged looks. Some were skeptical. Others looked relieved simply to see her alive. The leader finally spoke again, this time directly to Ayanna. His voice carried authority that came from age and respect. "You were chosen for a union," he said. "You knew the path. You knew the duty. Why did you run?" Ayanna lowered her eyes for a moment. Samuel could feel the tension in her body, the fear of speaking her truth. But she slowly lifted her head again, letting her voice rise with quiet bravery. "Because it was not my choice," she said. "I was told to accept a future I did not want. I was told my feelings did not matter. I ran because my heart could not carry a life that was not mine." The warriors murmured among themselves. Some looked angry, but the leader remained still. He watched Ayanna as if searching for cracks in her courage, but she did not break. "You dishonored the ceremony," another warrior said sternly. "You brought shame." Ayanna inhaled shakily. "I brought truth," she replied. "Better shame than living a life without freedom." Samuel felt something tighten in his chest. Her words weren't just brave, they were painful. He knew how difficult it was for her to say them in front of men who had power over her life. The leader raised his hand again, silencing the younger warrior. He turned to Samuel once more. "You sheltered her," he said calmly. "Why?" Samuel didn't hesitate. "She needed help. I gave help. Nothing more." Ayanna turned her head slightly, her expression softening. Samuel's simplicity, his honesty, meant more to her than she could show. The leader studied Samuel again. "Do you know what it means to take a ceremonial bride from her people?" he asked. "I didn't take her," Samuel repeated. "I only helped." "And if she stays?" the leader asked sharply. Samuel froze. He hadn't thought that far. He didn't know whether she wanted to stay or leave forever. But he knew he didn't want her to be forced into anything again. Before he could answer, Ayanna stepped forward, her voice rising. "The choice is mine," she said firmly. "Not his, not yours, mine." The leader's eyes narrowed, but he did not interrupt. Ayanna continued, her voice steady even though her fingers trembled lightly. "I will not return to the tribe under force. I will not return to a marriage I did not choose. I am here because I wanted freedom. If freedom means leaving forever, then I accept that." A soft silence fell over the land. Even the horses seemed still. The leader slowly exhaled as if the weight of her words struck him more deeply than he expected. He stepped closer, stopping only a few steps away from her. "You understand," he said quietly, "that if you choose to stay away, you cannot return? You cannot stand with us again. You cannot walk among us as one of us. Your place will be removed." Ayanna's eyes glistened, but she didn't look away. "Yes," she whispered. "I understand." Samuel felt the pain hidden in that small word. Ayanna's tribe was her history, her identity, her blood. She wasn't just walking away from a forced union. She was walking away from everything she had ever known. The leader looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly, deeply, as if accepting something heavy. "Your choice is yours," he said at last. "If you wish to live outside, we will not drag you back. You are free to walk your own path." Ayanna closed her eyes for a second, relief, sadness, and shock washing over her all at once. Samuel watched her face, understanding how significant the moment was. A weight she had carried her whole life was finally lifted, but the cost was high. The leader turned to Samuel one last time. "You gave her shelter. You caused no harm. We hold no anger toward you." His voice was clear and solid. "If she chooses your land as her future, that is between you and her." Samuel exhaled very slowly, his hands no longer shaking. The riders mounted their horses again. Before leaving, the leader looked at Ayanna with a softer expression. "Walk with pride," he said, "even if your path is far from ours." Ayanna bowed her head once, showing respect without regret. The riders turned and began riding away, their silhouettes fading into the rising sunlight. Samuel and Ayanna stood silently as the dust settled behind them. When the last rider disappeared over the ridge, the land felt huge and quiet again. Ayanna's breath trembled. Samuel turned to her. "Are you all right?" She looked at him with eyes full of emotion. Hurt, relief, sadness, courage, and something new he had not seen before. Not fear, not gratitude, something deeper, quieter. She took a small step toward him. Her voice was soft but steady. "I chose freedom," she said. "But freedom needs a place to rest. I would like to stay, if you allow." Samuel felt something warm spread in his chest. His voice was gentle when he replied, "You can stay, as long as you wish." Ayanna looked at the small house, the land stretching all around them, the quiet that had once felt lonely but now felt like possibility. She wasn't choosing a man. She was choosing peace, safety, and a life she could shape with her own hands. Samuel stepped back, giving her space to breathe. to decide her pace. Ayanna took another slow step toward the porch, her injured ankle forcing her to move carefully. Samuel supported her only when she allowed it, and she felt comfort in that respect. Inside the house, the fire crackled softly. The morning light poured through the window, warm and gentle. Ayanna sat down, looking around with calm eyes that finally held peace. Samuel poured her a cup of warm water. "You don't owe me anything," he said quietly. "You're free now." Ayanna shook her head softly. "I know, and that is why I stay." The quiet room felt different now. Not lonely, not empty. It felt like the beginning of something steady and real. Samuel returned to his work outside, but every so often he glanced toward the house, and every time he did, Ayanna was looking at the land like she was memorizing her new life. She touched the wooden cup Samuel had carved earlier, smiling gently at the small artistic marks. She was no longer the frightened woman he found in the mud. She was someone who had stood against an entire tradition, chosen her own path, and found a place where she could finally breathe. And Samuel was no longer the lonely farmer who expected nothing from life. He was the man who offered safety without expecting reward, and in return found something he never believed he would have again: company, trust, and slow-growing hope. The farmer's silent home slowly became a place shared by two hearts who had lived through different storms but found calm in the same land. Nothing rushed, nothing forced, nothing expected. Just two people building a future day by day, choice by choice. And from that morning forward, Samuel always remembered the moment he stood beside Ayanna against the rising sun, the moment fear and courage changed both of their destinies forever.